When an empath reaches the point of being done, something profound takes place beneath the surface. It is not an explosion, it is not a dramatic confrontation, it is a quiet but final withdrawal that shakes the narcissist's entire structure of control. The narcissist is accustomed to the empath's engagement. This engagement can take many forms: pleading, arguing, explaining, or even staying silent while internally distressed. To the narcissist, any form of emotional presence is still a form of supply. It feeds them, it assures them that the connection remains alive, that the empath is still invested enough to respond. But when the empath is done, there is no response to feed on. This does not mean they stop speaking. They may still speak, but there is no emotional charge behind their words. The tone changes. The eyes no longer reflect the deep emotional current the narcissist is used to seeing. And without that current, the narcissist feels as if the ground beneath them has shifted. In my observations, this is the moment the narcissist truly begins to panic. The empath's withdrawal is not just a loss of attention, and it is the removal of the very mirror in which the narcissist's identity has been sustained. A narcissist survives through projection. They project their unwanted traits outward, placing them into the empath, and the empath, sensitive by nature, reflects this material back in a way that allows the narcissist to maintain their illusion of control. But when the empath detaches, the projection no longer lands. The narcissist is left alone with their own reflection, something they have spent a lifetime avoiding. This is why the empath's quiet withdrawal feels so destabilizing. It is not merely the loss of someone's attention, it is the collapse of a carefully maintained psychological defense. The empath at this stage is no longer looking to fix, heal, or understand. They have accepted what stands before them. They are no longer hoping for transformation from the narcissist. They have turned their attention inwards, choosing self-preservation over the exhausting cycle of defense and repair. It is in this turning inward that the empath becomes most dangerous to the narcissist, not because they seek revenge or punishment, but because they no longer provide the very conditions in which the narcissist's illusions can survive. For the narcissist, this is not just rejection, it is annihilation of the image they have depended on for stability. And the empath, having reclaimed their own energy, stands beyond the reach of manipulation. The danger of an empath who is done lies in what happens within the archetypal field of the relationship. For much of the interaction, the empath has unconsciously occupied the archetype of the healer, the caretaker, or the redeemer. They have stood opposite the narcissist's archetype of the tyrant, the manipulator, or the wounded child. This dynamic has energy because both positions feed each other. The narcissist relies on the empath to remain in the role that sustains their identity. The empath's energy, their patience, their listening, their willingness to believe in change allows the narcissist to continue as they are without collapse. But when the empath withdraws, the archetype dissolves. The redeemer is no longer there to validate the wounded child. The caretaker no longer supports the tyrant's position of authority. This removal creates what I call an archetypal collapse. The narcissist's identity becomes unstable because the counterbalance has vanished. From a Jungian perspective, this is more than personal. The empath's withdrawal removes a mirror in which the narcissist projected both their rejected traits and their idealized image. Projection, once disrupted, forces the narcissist to face the unintegrated shadow within themselves. This is an experience they are psychologically unprepared for, which is why they react with confusion, anger, or sudden attempts at reconciliation. The empath, meanwhile, steps into a new archetype, the sovereign self. This shift is subtle but absolute. No longer defined by the narcissist's approval or disapproval, they become centered in their own inner authority. They no longer need to explain their boundaries, they simply live them. It is important to understand that this state of being is not an act of aggression. The empath is not seeking to destroy the narcissist. But from the narcissist's perspective, the empath's independence is a threat. It represents the loss of control, the loss of the dynamic upon which their false self depends. The danger to the narcissist is not in what the empath does, but in what they no longer do. They no longer supply the emotional energy that sustains the illusion. They no longer serve as a repository for the narcissist's projections, and they no longer respond in the ways that keep the game alive. In this moment, the narcissist stands before a mirror that no longer reflects what they want to see. And the empath, in reclaiming themselves, becomes the very symbol of freedom that the narcissist cannot tolerate. When the empath detaches, the narcissist is confronted with a problem they cannot solve in their usual ways. For as long as the empath was emotionally involved, manipulation had leverage. Now that leverage is gone. This is the moment when the narcissist shifts into their final strategies, the last attempts to pull the empath back into the dynamic. The first tactic is false vulnerability. The narcissist may present themselves as wounded, misunderstood, or in sudden need of care. They may apologize in ways they never have before, using words that seem unfamiliar to their usual patterns. This is not true self-reflection, but an act meant to trigger the empath's old role as healer. The second tactic is provocation through subtle insult. When empathy no longer brings a response, the narcissist may attempt to awaken anger instead. They will make comments designed to elicit defensiveness or pride, hoping the empath will re-engage just to prove a point. But an empath who is done does not rise to this bait. Their silence or their measured indifference becomes the signal that the dynamic has truly shifted. The third tactic is recruitment of others. If direct influence no longer works, the narcissist may turn to mutual friends, family members, or colleagues to create pressure. They will present themselves as misunderstood, casting the empath as distant or unreasonably cold. The aim is to create enough doubt in the empath's stance that they begin to question themselves. These strategies fail when the empath remains anchored in their new position. Detachment is not indifference, it is clarity. The empath sees these final maneuvers for what they are, the last echoes of an old pattern that no longer commands their energy. From a Jungian perspective, the empath's refusal to re-engage is the closing of a psychic circuit. The narcissist's energy has nowhere to flow, and without a receptive channel, it dissipates. The empath has reclaimed the projection, returned the shadow to its source, and stepped outside the loop entirely. What follows for the narcissist is often a descent into agitation or withdrawal. Without an audience, without the constant reflection of their image, they are left with themselves. For the empath, this is the moment of final liberation. Not because they have defeated the narcissist, but because they have withdrawn from the cycle altogether. The most dangerous person to a narcissist is not the one who fights them, but the one who no longer plays the game at all. When the empath reaches the point of detachment, the internal shift is as profound as the external one. Outwardly, it may seem as though they have simply gone quiet, withdrawn, or stopped reacting. But beneath the surface, there is a psychological transformation underway that marks the true end of the narcissist's influence. For much of the relationship, the empath's focus has been outward. Their attention has been on understanding the narcissist, responding to their moods, and trying to create stability in an unstable dynamic. This constant outward focus creates a subtle self-abandonment. The empath's energy becomes invested in maintaining the connection, even at the expense of their own well-being. When detachment occurs, this energy reverses its direction. The empath begins to turn inward. They recognize the patterns that have kept them bound, not in a moment of anger, but in a moment of clarity. They stop seeking validation from the narcissist because they have stopped seeking the narcissist's transformation as the condition for their own peace. This is not a moment of coldness, it is a moment of wholeness. The empath realizes that they can step out of the cycle without waiting for the narcissist to change. In Jungian terms, they have withdrawn the projection. The power they once unconsciously gave away has returned to them. Psychologically, the empath moves into a state of self-governance. They set boundaries without feeling the need to justify them. They make decisions without checking how the narcissist might react. They begin to live in alignment with their own inner compass, which is no longer distorted by constant manipulation. The narcissist often interprets this as hostility. In reality, it is neutrality. The empath no longer needs to defend, explain, or persuade. They are no longer trying to win a battle or avoid one. They have simply stepped out of the arena. This is why the empath in this state is dangerous to the narcissist, not because they attack, but because they refuse engagement. The narcissist's strategies, which depend on emotional reaction, fall useless. The empath has shifted to a psychological position where the narcissist no longer has influence. In my work, I have seen this moment become a turning point not only for the empath, but for others observing the dynamic. The empath's quiet detachment can serve as a model of individuation, a reminder that peace does not come from controlling the other, but from reclaiming the self. The empath who is done represents the end of the narcissist's game, not because they have out-argued them or overpowered them, but because they have stepped beyond the reach of manipulation. The narcissist cannot tolerate this state. Their power depends on reaction, and without reaction, their tactics collapse. They may try one last performance of remorse, one final provocation, or a new attempt to pull the empath back into orbit. But these attempts carry no weight against someone who has reclaimed their center. In my terms, the empath has individuated out of the dynamic. They are no longer defined by the role of healer, rescuer, or mirror. They are no longer an audience for the narcissist's endless performance. Instead, they are rooted in self-awareness, self-governance, and inner stability. For the narcissist, this is the most dangerous kind of person, the one who does not fight, does not plead, and does not return. The empath's silence becomes the boundary that cannot be breached. And in this silence lies freedom, not the kind granted by the narcissist's approval or understanding, but the kind that comes from knowing the cycle has ended. The empath walks away whole, and the narcissist is left alone with the one person they have avoided all along, themselves.